Good morning, everyone. I am happy to be here with you all this morning to share on this important topic. Um, Thank you, Charmaine, for that introduction. And we're going to jump right in on today's topic of providing practical support and ways to support a family experiencing pediatric cancer. As Charmaine said, I have been a chaplain in this arena for a little under a decade now. And so I've worked with quite a few families. And so what I'm going to present today is a lot of what I've learned from experience, but also a lot of what I've heard directly from families who have gone through this journey. And so I want to begin by looking at some of the things that families are dealing with beyond just the diagnosis that we all know that they're already processing. Things that we don't always think about, the specifics, but for a lot of families, they're dealing with unexpected hospitalizations. A lot of families who are going through the journey of cancer with their child, they sometimes don't even know they're going to be admitted on the day that they come to the hospital. So they come for one thing, it ends up being an admission, and that admission sometimes turns into what are extended hospital stays that can be a week, 2 weeks, et cetera. So that's one of the challenges that families deal with is that there's a lot of unknown in the course of treatment. There are a lot of things that they know how to plan around, but then there's always those things that are just uncertain and that pop up that they deal with, they navigate. And so it's important to make sure that we're aware of those things as well. Extended appointments and outpatient visits. So along the same lines, again, people come sometimes for a day visit, thinking this is going to be an in and out appointment type thing, and it may turn into an admission, or it may turn into what they thought was a 2-hour visit turns into an 8-day hour visit in the hospital. So keeping those things in mind as we think about what families are actually navigating. As I said, these things the attempt here is to really give us a framework for understanding what families are, some of the things they're navigating and experiencing. Financial strain. A lot of our families have to navigate and deal with things such as taking a leave of absence from work, or various things that put that strain on their family. Every family is different. Every family is made up differently. Some families only have one breadwinner. Some families have two. So families have different experiences when it comes to this component. But I think it's important that we all are aware of it and recognize that families are especially in a situation where a lot of times from a vulnerable standpoint, having to deal with balancing financial burdens. And then as we all know, in just everyday life, it is difficult to navigate work, family, life balance for any of us. And then to put on top of that, balancing the healthcare environment and balancing all the things that come along with cancer care treatment. So if we all know how difficult that is to already balance those three things, just imagine what those families are dealing with when they're trying to navigate all the different elements that come along with the treatment component as well. Balancing household responsibilities, little things that we take for granted. So things like having the opportunity to actually spend time cleaning their house or doing a deep clean of their house or doing lawn care. Those little things, families really struggle to be able to find the time to actually do those things sometimes. As I said, sometimes families may be in the hospital for a 2-week period, and then they may go home for a weekend and be scheduled to come right back for an admission the next week. And so there's a very limited amount of time they have at home sometimes. And so finding in that limited space and that limited time, finding the ability to be able to do all the things that they need to do to kind of keep their family going and maintaining can be a challenge. So that's another component that we don't think about a lot. And then just balancing those regular parenting responsibilities. It's important to acknowledge, especially for families who have multiple children, that although we have a sick child here who we're focusing on, we're trying to provide care for, that family, those parents still have 2-3 other kids that they have to provide for and continue to provide parenting support for as well. And so that becomes a challenge when you're geographically having to be at the hospital, but you got 2 or 3 other kids at home that also need mom, that also need dad. It becomes a struggle to figure out how do I decide and prioritize where to be and when. Do I need to be at the hospital with this child or at home with these children? And that's a real struggle that we overlook often with families. The other piece is relationship strain. So just like with those children and the challenges that families express and experience with being able to navigate providing the parental support to all of the children, a lot of times relationships become strained between, a lot of times between mom and dad, between the parents. It becomes a real strain because families are so focused on providing the care, they have little time to really deal with the things, again, that we take for granted in our relationships of being able to talk and process. A lot of that goes out of the window for a lot of these families. And so it's important that we acknowledge that. And we'll talk about in a little bit how we make space for allowing families to focus on those things. But relationship training is a big thing. When we look at the population, we actually see a lot of families experience trouble in this area. And so figuring out how we support families better is really a priority that we have to focus on going forward. Spiritual and emotional challenges. There is a lot of, as I said in the beginning, a lot of uncertainty that these families face. And so when families come in, their emotions can change very quickly because it's like riding a roller coaster. And you may come in expecting one thing today and you get news that you did not expect. And so your emotions are constantly all over the place, it seems, at times. And along with the emotional piece comes the spiritual, the spiritual dilemma and the spiritual distress for a lot of people. And this is something that a lot of people really are not comfortable with, but it's something that we need to talk about. And again, we're going to talk about it briefly a little bit later in this talk. And then another thing that is really major that we certainly don't give enough attention to is survivor guilt. Both the child and the parents experience this. For families who are in treatment centers often, they get to know other families and other patients who are also going through and experiencing the same thing that they are. And so a lot of the families get to know each other. They become very well acquainted. They build their own bonds and their own friendships and connections, which is a beautiful thing to see. But at the same time, in situations where a lot of times where a family may lose their child, another family that they're connected to also deals with what we call survivor's guilt. It's this burden of like, why did this parent have to lose their child and yet mine is still here? It's a struggle. It may sound a little different to hear, but it's a real thing that families really struggle with. And as I said, for children, it's especially something. A lot of the grief work that I've done with patients over the years has really been done with kind of the teenage population. And a lot of it has been done around this very topic. They bond with other teenagers, other children who are going through the same journey they are. They see them in treatment every week. They get connected to them. They make bonds with them. And then all of a sudden, this child is now gone. And they have to process and grapple with like that loss. And a lot of times for many of these kids, this may be the first loss they've ever experienced in their life. So they've connected with somebody, they've made a friend, and then they're experiencing grief and loss, which is a new element, a new component for them that they've never experienced. But then also there's a survivor's piece of like, is this going to happen to me? Or why weren't they able to get treatment? And not understanding all of the time the different complexities of the different things around treatment. And then the last one is just stress. And I put that one in capital letters because I don't think we really acknowledge for a lot of people just how stressful this whole experience can be. We oftentimes downplay and we tell people, things that aren't always helpful about how to manage that stress. And tomorrow's going to be better. You just got to keep pushing through. Those things are not helpful for families a lot of times. But we have to be able to get to a place where we can actually acknowledge the level of stress that they're actually carrying and just how much of a weight that it really is for families. So now I want to talk a little bit about how we approach being supportive. And this is not an extensive list of all the different ways. This is not an extensive list of all the different ways that we can be supportive, but I just wanted to provide, again, some ideas here and a kind of a starting point, a baseline for us to start thinking about like how we offer support to people and how we approach being supportive. And one of those things is I want to start here with avoid statements like, if I were you, I would. I can't tell you how many times families have shared with me like how family members or friends have come to them with these types of statements. And what it does is we just talked about stress, when you approach people who are already dealing with the stressful element, making those kind of statements add another level of stress, because now they're second guessing. They may be second guessing whatever decision they made. They may be second guessing whether they're doing the right thing, whether all kinds of things. But you call into another level of stress to come upon this family that is not necessary at this moment. So I encourage people to, instead of doing that, to provide a non-judgmental listening presence, which is learning to just sit with people and be with people and just listen. And it sounds really simple, but as a culture, as American culture, it's not something we're really good at doing. It's just sitting with people and allowing them to sometimes just process, to just vent, to just express what they're dealing with, and just being there and providing that empathetic support, and being that listening presence, that listening support without those judgmental statements. One of the other things I would say is it's important not to minimize or downplay that families experience, and this ties right back into what I was just saying. But a lot of times we find that trying to offer optimism is what people are, that's the intention we often have. But by trying to provide optimism, we actually downplay the experience. So saying things like, well, at least it's not as bad as it could be. Well, at least your child is here. Well, at least this. Those kind of statements are not helpful. So I really encourage people to not use those statements. Again, to really focus on trying to be present with both the child and the family, and really be in the moment with them to actually hear like what it is they're experiencing, and just be there with them. And that leads into the next point, which is to be genuine in your concern. I think there's an element of for families that we all kind of have that sense of knowing when people are being sincere and genuine. But being genuine in your concern really shows up in how you show up for people, how you're present for people, how you listen, how you support, and those kind of things, as opposed to just kind of, I hate to use the word nagging, but constantly asking parents about things that you're just trying to get information. That again becomes another stressor for families when you're not really being genuine in your concern, but you're really more asking because you're just trying to get information for whatever reason, those kind of things. So it's really important to focus on, if you're going to be supportive, really make sure that you have you're genuine in that, and that you have the capacity to be able to do what it is you're asking them to do. We use that statement a lot. You know, if you need me, call me. And if you don't really mean that, if you don't really have the capacity to be the recipient of that need, then don't offer that. Also, I say avoid religious pressure and unhealthy theology. Again, I could talk all day on that topic alone and how difficult that can be for families. But again, when I say avoid religious pressure, don't use a lot of religious jargon to kind of guilt people into what they're feeling. Don't tell people that they're experiencing what they are because they just don't believe enough or their faith isn't strong enough. Those kind of things are not helpful for people who are already carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders right now. It's really, if people make religious or spiritual comments, that's fine to say like, hey, like I'm standing with you, I'm praying with you, whatever that may be. But I discourage us from getting to a place where we really just force upon people language that is really unhealthy theologically, and just unhealthy from an emotional standpoint, and not really helping people be able to process what they're actually feeling in the moment. It's okay for people to feel like this is too much. It's okay for people to feel like, you know, this is really heavy. When people make those kind of statements, we don't know what to do with them a lot of times as a society again. And so I think that's a place where we really have to learn how to listen to people, ask questions like, what do you mean that right now that this is heavy? What can I do to help lighten this load? Those kind of things are what we're talking about as being really helpful in this place. Also, I would say when you offer to support a family, it's really important to make sure that you focus on very specific offers instead of kind of generalized offers. As I said earlier, we often say things like, if you need me, call me, or if there's anything I can do, let me know. And when we make those statements, we put the burden on the person in need to be able to come up with what it is we can do. What is more helpful is when we can offer tangible things and say, hey, if you would like, let me take the kids to school for you this week so you can focus on little Johnny. Or if it's helpful for you, could I mow the lawn this week? Those are ways that we offer like tangible things. And it's okay to even give people choices. You know, I want to do something for you. I want to help, but I don't know if it's more helpful to do this or to do that. But give people options, and that tends to be more like they're more likely to accept one of those things or to ask for one of those things than if you just leave the door wide open and saying, hey, if you need anything, let me know. Because they've got so many things going through their mind right now. They're trying to keep up with appointments. They're trying to make sure their child doesn't have fevers. They're trying to make sure the other kids are getting everything. They're doing all of these things that we all, like I said, do on a daily basis with another added element to that. And so in doing that, they don't really have time to always think through all the ways that you might be able to support them, or who should they reach out to support them in a certain way. So like I said, just be direct and just offer specific things that you are willing to do. And again, that you have the capacity to do. The other piece I would say is learning to respect boundaries with families. And so we all got different relationships with people, and it's important to know, like, don't offer to do something. If you're not close enough with someone, like if this person's children have never been in your home and you all aren't friends and you all are not close, don't offer to babysit their kids. Like if you know they may not be comfortable enough with that. Like, so make sure whatever you're offering is something that is within the boundaries of the relationship you have with people. And also respecting boundaries. And as I said earlier, don't ask inappropriate questions. Don't, if people aren't giving you information, don't, beg or ask or pry for information. Respect the boundaries of family. This is a very private matter that families are dealing with. And there's some aspects of that care that they don't want to share with everybody. There's some things that they want to keep just in their immediate circle, and that's okay. And so I think it's important that, like I said, you have to know like what your relationship is to both the child, to the family, all of those elements, and how do we navigate that. If you're family, you may approach what you offer one way, as opposed to if you're the neighbor who lives 5 houses down the street and you don't really like interact a lot, but you know they're going through this journey. So just think about those things and be respectful in how you offer like your support and assistance. And then the last thing there I would say is to, as much as possible, help maintain a normal environment for the child. And I think this is important for whether you're family or whether you're community or church or school, wherever. I think it's important to children want to feel like they want to feel normal. They want to feel like they're a child. They want to do what their friends are doing. And so I think it's important that as we know children are going through this journey, that we do make every effort to make creative ways for them to experience what other children are experiencing. I'll give you a few examples. Like if you have a high school senior and you're in the school system, I really think, if you want to make an impact for that child, find a way that, if this is a senior, find a way that as a school, you can help make them incorporated into the senior events that are happening in that school. Or if they're same thing, if there are things happening, if there's a field day happening at a middle school, elementary school, find a way to incorporate that child, if possible, into some of the things that are happening. And that may be someone coming to do something one-on-one with that child, whether in a home setting or different things, or it may be using technology to allow that child to be present virtually in those events. But finding some way just to be creative to keep them connected to their environment. A lot of children who are involved in sports, they're not able to physically play sports at the time, but just keeping the connection with their sports team and having them around them and support them to come visit, to be able to watch games or to watch video clips of the games. Those kind of things are really important. And I think we miss a lot of those opportunities as a community because we just assume that someone is sick and so they're not in a place to be able to engage in certain things. But I think really finding those ways to be able to connect them back to the things that, like I said, make them feel normal. So for children, I think there's a lot of opportunities to do this, and we just have to be creative and be intentional in how we think about it. And so here we're going to talk about some of those practical ways. And again, This is a very short list of ways, but I'm using this just to kind of help us kind of brainstorm as a baseline of some of the ways that we can do, that we can provide support in practical ways. So one of the things is providing meals. As I said, families are oftentimes late from appointments. They have extended stays. Their days are often filled with a lot of responsibilities and a lot of things. So sometimes when you know the family is going to be home for this week, maybe providing a meal for them at home, having a meal delivered, or how that may look for you. Or even when they're in the hospital, sometimes providing a meal, having something delivered to them. Those kind of things can be helpful. They're things that the family does. That's one thing they don't have to think about for that day. So that can be a very helpful and tangible thing. As I said earlier, offering to do the lawn, not just the lawn. I mean, if you're the next door neighbor, for example, or you live around the corner, and you know that the family is home this weekend, and you know they've been traveling a lot, maybe their car needs washing. Maybe there's a lot of different things that you could offer. But again, offering those tangible things that people just don't have the time to actually devote to right now, but it would be a nice gesture for them to be able to have. So those are ways we can think about. Encouraging and supporting a date night. This is one of those ways we help support the relationship component for families. Encouraging a family to say, hey, I know you all have been really focused on little Johnny's care. I really want to do something for you. What do you guys think about, we just want to give you all the evening to go do something, and we'll stay here with the kids. And again, that's a boundary piece. You have to be able to know that you have that relationship with those families, with that family, to be able to offer that. But if you do, that's a very genuine offer, and something that people aren't expecting someone to offer them. That comes with a lot of caveats. We know different children have different needs and needs of care and things like that. So some families may not be initially open to it, but it's a very important thing to offer. And I say it just really depends on the level of relationship you have with that family. But being able to offer that, being able to offer to just watch the kids, sometimes for an afternoon or for a couple hours. Sometimes when families are home on their breaks from the hospital, things of that nature, they may have just a weekend home, as I said earlier. And so it's important to allow them the opportunity to be able to just do something. As parents, sometimes they may need to go get groceries for the house, or they may need to do run errands or do anything, or maybe they just need to go out and go for a walk. But offering to give them that opportunity to go and do something, and while you help support the kids or things of that nature. Offering to help with siblings, as I said earlier, parents are juggling, trying to get to early appointments and things of that nature sometimes. So helping get kids to school, get kids home from school. Your kids are friends with my kids. We live 2 doors down. Maybe your kids, I can just bring them from school and I can watch them until you get here. Alleviating that stress, because it is a stressor when parents they get tied up in those appointments. Like I said earlier, they went at 10 o'clock, thought they would be back home by 12, and here it is 2:45 and they're still at their appointment and school gets out at 3 o'clock. That's a stressor for families. And so if they know that they have those people, that support system around them, that can grab their kids from school, things of that nature, and watch them without them having to be worried about it and filled with anxiety about where my kid is, are they safe, all those kind of things, that can be a great resource for them. That's a great way to offer that support. Inviting parents to engage in self-care. I had a mom recently who told me a few weeks ago, she said, one of the things I miss most since my child has been sick, she said, no one wants to just do the simple things with me, like just go have a cup of coffee. And she's like, I'm busy, I'm running a lot, I'm doing a lot to care for my child. She was like, but in those few still moments I have, I have nobody that I can actually call to just go down the street to a coffee shop or the Starbucks or wherever, just to have a cup of coffee, just to get away from the environment for a moment, just to be an adult, just to have normal conversation. So these are the little kind of things that we can think about just with self-care, offering to, let's go take a walk together. If you're in the same neighborhood, or let's do something. It can be something small. It doesn't always have to be something big or massive, but just think about the little things that we can do just to get people in an element that they can, again, care for themselves, but also just get a different scene of environment. Financial assistance, this is one that I will say, financial assistance is tricky from a personal standpoint. People are usually less likely to accept financial support. from like a family member or from a friend. But I think this is a big one for communities. So like a lot of times schools and churches and sports teams, and they want to know how they can support a family. I often say financial assistance is one of those ways. If you have the ability to do that, families are more likely to receive things um, from institutions and organizations than they are from individuals. They're dealing with if they're in Eastern North Carolina, for example, they may be traveling a great distance to go back and forth to their appointments. So that's gas money. That's food when they travel. Like all of those things those things add up very quickly. And so I think financial assistance is always something that families need. As I said earlier, some of them are out of work, so they may need help paying certain bills. So there's always kind of a need a lot of times for financial support, financial assistance, not always, but a lot of the times, so most of the time. But people are just not going to ask directly person to person for that type of support. So again, knowing your boundaries and knowing how to navigate that, I really would encourage that more from a community organization standpoint than I would a personal standpoint. And of course, wherever they are in the healthcare system, their psychosocial support teams, so the social workers, chaplains, they should all be working to make sure that these families are also getting connected to organizations like GLOW and other organizations that offer those types of support as well. So there are things out there that can provide that support. But I think this is also a way, like I said, that community organizations can actually be supportive and engaged as well. And then again, finding ways to, again, normalize that experience for the child. So finding ways to incorporate whatever you can with that child into their environment and their life, figuring out ways to do things with them. As I said, earlier, you just finding ways to offer whatever you're offering in what will be their normal environment. Find a way to offer it to them if they can't be in that environment, within the environment that they're in. And I will also say, when I talk about normalizing for the child, not just for the child who has cancer, but also for those siblings, because the thing I like to emphasize to people, when a family receives that diagnosis of cancer, it impacts that entire family. Like everything for that entire family changes. So it's not just the child who is sick that is impacted. It's not just those parents that are impacted, but the entire family system, the siblings, grandparents, everybody that is nuclearly attached to that family is impacted in some way. And beyond that, the community is impacted, the extended family. I mean, all of those elements, everything begins to change. We're all like, it's all like connected, and everybody feels that impact in a different way. So it's really important that we find the ways to be able to support one another and to be able to support the family and the child, but recognizing that it's not just the parents and the child that are experiencing this, but really those siblings. Sibling care is a big area that we often overlook and don't give enough attention to as well. I want to leave time for us to engage in some questions and hopefully conversation. So I want to go here and now and ask if there are any questions. If so, you can feel free to put them in the chat at this time, and I will be glad to try to answer them. I hope this information has been helpful. So the first question is, what are some things someone can say to families to start a conversation or to show them you are there to actively listen to them? I think with that question, I think the main thing is just learning to, I think we always feel like we have to say something. And I think the first thing we have to recognize is, as I said, from a cultural standpoint, is we have to recognize that sometimes when people want to share, we just have a duty to just be there and listen. And it's not always about having something to say back to them. But to initiate that conversation, I would just say, approaching them and saying, hey, I just want you to know that I'm here to support you. I'm here to be a listening ear. If there's a way that I can do that for you, I'm here. Sometimes just inviting people to say, hey, like, I recognize that this is a lot. I recognize that you've had a lot of changes lately. And I just wanted to check in with you and see what are some ways that I can support you right now. So yeah, I just think that just making that that approach without the judgmental piece, I think is really key. I hope that makes sense. But really being able to provide without just recognizing that we don't always have to say something in response. I think we feel like we always have to, like, when people offer like what they're feeling, we always want to make people feel better. And I think sometimes it's okay to recognize that people don't need to feel better. They need to feel heard. They need to feel seen. They need to feel acknowledged and validated. And it's okay to just say, yeah, I recognize that this is a lot. I can't imagine what you're going through right now. I want you to know that I'm here with you. I want you to know that I'm so sorry for what you're experiencing right now. I want you to know that just those kind of validating and affirming statements without trying to, like I said, counter it with optimism or those kind of things. And as I said, every family is different. So it's really about, again, knowing you have to know, like, know who you're talking to. We all know our family members, we all know our friends. And so I think it's important to be able to recognize when we see those changes from an emotional standpoint, when we see those changes, when we see people withdrawing and isolating. I think that's another place that we can focus on too. I think especially, I don't know if there are any men on the line this morning, but I think it's important for men, for us to be able to acknowledge those changes within our friends. Because a lot of times dads especially, dads have a tendency to want to fix things. That's what they're trained to do. And so a lot of times dads will really mask those feelings and those emotions and not want to talk. But what happens is a lot of times we start to see that they start to isolate and drift away from, like, their support system. And so I think it's especially, like, if you have a father that's involved, I think it's really important that we make sure, like, we're putting some support around them as well. Fathers and grandfathers, they feel like they gotta carry the weight. They can't show them. Mothers will cry with you sometimes, but dads gotta tough it out. We can't let people see us cry. Those kind of things. And so I think making those environments, finding ways to support them and to a lot of times that takes place one-on-one, but really finding ways and just to be able to recognize, like, the changes we see in those around us, and supporting, when we feel people are really overwhelmed and really struggling with the challenges, offering things like mental health support. We have to break the stigma around that topic. It's a lot to process, it's a lot to work through, it's a lot to, with the survivor's guilt piece I talked about and all the other things that go on with this element. I think it's important to make sure we remind people that, there are people that are out here to help you process and navigate these kind of things. I may not have the answers, but what do you think about getting connected with a therapist? And that may be kind of the financial piece sometimes, because a lot of times people don't seek therapy because they don't have the financial piece to be able to do that. And so again, that may be something you can tangibly offer. Hey, like, I'll pay for you to get 2 or 3 sessions of counseling if it's going to help you. Those kind of things. But I think we have to break that stigma around that too, making people think that because they need to seek support, that somehow there's a weakness. There's not. We need that encouragement and that element of support at times. I think survivor's guilt. I think how do you support someone experiencing survivor's guilt and parent or child? I think the key there again is to allow people to express what it is they're feeling. A lot of times we miss the signs of survivor's guilt because we don't really engage people and talk to people and just say, hey man, like, I recognize you've been very quiet the last few days. Like, you want to talk about it? That's the way that I've approached it a lot with a lot of the teenagers. It's just those kind of conversations. And they'll start talking, they'll say a little bit, oh, I'm just thinking about X or whatever. And then you start, asking questions and but really just get them to a place where they can feel safe to talk and really to share with you. But when you get beyond that and you recognize that it's survivor's guilt, I think I like to emphasize on people, as a chaplain, from a spiritual standpoint, I like to help people understand, like, we all have a purpose. We all have a purpose, and we're here to fulfill that purpose. And I believe that when that purpose is fulfilled, that's what we've ultimately been brought here to do. And so learning where people are spiritually and religiously and being able to use that language to help them process can be helpful in that element. Not everybody is there, but being able to kind of figure out where people are, you can draw upon things like that to help people navigate that piece. But I also think helping people reorient to like, a lot of times I would tell kids like, okay, so unfortunately you're here. And so what are we gonna do going forward? So helping people shift from a statement of victim to a empowerment statement. So not necessarily being about optimism, but helping them take that energy and redirect it to, so what are we gonna do to honor this person? So you're still here, you still have fight, you still have an opportunity. What are you gonna do to honor this person? This is the way you can honor them now, by continuing your journey and continuing your fight. And a lot of times you see kids who take that and go on to overcome their cancer, go on to do great things. And they'll tell you when you talk to them about like what motivated you, it's not the fact that they overcame cancer a lot of times, it's that they lost someone on their journey. They were connected, and now I'm doing this because I got a chance when this person did. So you'll find it a lot talking to a lot of teenagers and young adults who overcome their cancer journeys. What are some resources you recommend to families or individuals that they can share with families walking through this when you may not have the right or encouraging words to say? I would say there's a lot of websites and things that are out there. Again, it's just knowing who people are and where they're coming from. There's a lot like Guideposts is a religious network that has a lot of like literature and things that you can provide. But if someone isn't super religious, then none of that is really going to benefit them. So it's really about getting like knowing who the person is. But I think some tangible resources is also being able to ask them sometimes when they're sharing things with you that you may not feel comfortable with. They're just saying to them, say, hey, have you talked to the social worker at the hospital? Or, have you talked to the chaplain about any of these things? Because sometimes they may not be thinking that that's a social work thing or that's a chaplain thing, but, putting them back into the resources, because if they're in a healthcare system, they have a team that's there, that's supported their psychosocial support team to be able to support them and guide them on those things. Or as I said, being able to ask them, oh, have you ever considered seeing a therapist? There are family therapists. There are different types of therapists as well. There's family therapists. There are life coaches. There are different elements of those things that people can be open to depending on where they are and what their views are. But there, as I said, there are a lot of websites that offer different insights and things about, for example, activities families can do together, those kind of things. But I don't think there's one right or wrong way. Sometimes I discourage people from, like when I talk about websites, I encourage people to use websites that you can validate. So websites from like other health institutions or like health organizations or things like that are usually really good. But I encourage people to, when you come to using Google to like search for like things, sometimes you get all kind of stories, and the stories and experiences that other people have had can sometimes be helpful, but they can also sometimes be a distraction or add an additional level of turmoil for families, because people posting a lot of times what people post on the internet are the extreme worst experiences they've had in different healthcare systems. So sometimes directing people to those kind of support things are not always helpful, because people don't go on those websites and post the good experiences. They go on these websites and post the worst experiences ever. And then that sometimes gives families an additional layer of grief and struggle. I think you all may be able to unmute yourself at this point if you want to ask a question. The next question I have is, how would you recommend therapy or counseling to someone who may need it when there may be a stigma around it, especially in surrounding religious ideologies? That's a great question. Sometimes, again, this is depending on relationship, but sometimes people are hesitant to go because they aren't sure what therapy is going to be about. So sometimes there may be an opportunity, depending on who you are, to say, hey, I'll go with you. Sometimes that's an option that people may be open to. Also, I think just encouraging people to say, hey, like, help them break the stigma of, hey, like, therapy doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Therapy means that, like, you need someone to listen to you, need someone who can offer you tangible tools. Therapy is there to give you resources, to give you coping ideas and coping mechanisms and things that you can use. So it's not about saying that a lot of times people interpret therapy as being like, there's a weakness, there's something wrong with me. No, that's not the case. Like, there's a lot right with you. And so I want you to get to the person who can help give you tools to be able to use what you already have to learn how to cope better for what you're going through, for what you're experiencing. And I think that's one way to approach it. The religious piece, I think, is, again, I think really reminding people, instead of using the religious jargon or things that are just overly religious at times, you just got to keep believing. We know that, but like, that's not always helpful for people in that moment. So sometimes you have to just say to people, like, I know you're still believing and trusting for your miracle, but in the meantime, it's okay to talk to somebody about what you're going through in this moment right now. Again, and now there's space for both. There's space for us to pray and believe and trust and all of those things in a higher power, while at the same time acknowledging that what we're experiencing, what we're feeling is very real, it's very real, and it's not something that we can just pray away, in a sense. So I think, being able to change the way that we just talked about that is very helpful for people. And like I said, I think you all can unmute now if you have additional questions. If not, I hope this has been helpful. I hope you've gained something that you feel that you can use going forward in working with families and offering that support and being able to be that resource for those around you. I remain available. Charmaine knows how to get in touch with me. I remain available to answer questions or anything that I can, if I can be of that support and be that resource. So thank you all.
So on behalf of Gabby's Legacy organization, I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Calvin, for these important tips and methods to support families. If you all want to learn more about what we do and learn about webinars that we offer in the future, you can click on a link to our website and then sign up in the box at the bottom. All right. Once again, thank you all for attending, and we hope you all have a great weekend.